Hi, this is Dan here. I hope you're doing really well. You're about to watch a lesson from my new blues-based course where I have 12 different types of blues and each one has a play-along, then a lesson where I teach you how to play the exact written notation, then I'll break down the theory, the style, the chord progressions before going into the fourth section, and you're about to watch one of those now, which is just me teaching you how to make up a bass line over the chord progression. Now that's really the thing you need to learn if you want to play a blues jam and master how to improvise this amazing style. So I'll leave this with you now, and afterwards I'll give you a couple more details. This blues gives me the opportunity to teach you this, perhaps the weirdest sounding and looking thing in the course and the heaviest theory thing to talk about, but maybe I should have done this earlier on because it sort of makes sense of one of the important things I showed you before, which was a G7. Well, let's do G as an example. G dominant 7th arpeggio. And I explained to you that it's a major triad, but it also has a flat 7. And I also said to you that it's nearly a major 7th, but not. So every arpeggio comes from a scale. Looked at it the other way around, any scale gives you an arpeggio. So what is the scale that gives us the dominant 7th? It's this one. There are others, but this is one of them. A Mixolydian mode. Very briefly, because this isn't sort of the remit of this course, you have a scale, C major. And that scale can give you an arpeggio by just going 1, 3, 5, 7. We get a C major 7 arpeggio, major triad with major 7th. Now if I play C major but I start on the 5th note of that scale, so I just count up from C, which is 1, I get G, right? I'm going to put that down the octave. I'm now going to play C major starting on G. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I get a mode. It's a subset of a major scale. You can get other modes as well, but the Mixolydian mode is the one built on the 5th degree. Forget all that. We come up with this. It's blues. It just is the blues sound. It's also where we get that arpeggio. Every scale has an arpeggio with it, so those two things work together. It's like a chord-scale relationship. And we haven't used any notes from the Mixolydian, or I haven't spoken about it thus far. I just wanted to do some simpler stuff first and then hit you with that here. So of course, any previous song that has used dominant chords, and there have been loads of them, you can use this wider set of notes of the Mixolydian over it. We have a few little things to work on. Here's the first one. I'm playing it 2-4, 1-2, 4, 1, 2, 4 with the finger numbers all closed there. You can use open if you want. We have the same notes as a major scale. Root, major 2nd, major 3rd, 4th, 5th, major 6th. But the major 7th is not there. It's a flat 7. I will put a resource below of some very famous songs that use the Mixolydian mode. It's really, really, really important because it's used an awful lot. C Mixolydian, same thing, now on C. 3rd fret, A string. D Mixolydian, 2 frets higher on the D, A string is the D, and you play the same pattern. And that's the thing. You have choices now, quite a few more than you did before. Over a G7, you can play any of the patterns that worked before, and now this one. C7, same thing, C Mixolydian now. D Mixolydian. You tend not to hear it too much, to be honest, of that kind of stuff being used. It's usually a bit simpler than that. Let me just play to the backing track, and I'll just play a mode over each. It's not going to sound good, by the way, but I just want you to see that it fits. See what I mean? It doesn't sound like a bass line, but the notes do fit. So that's an option when you're playing. So, you know, let's just say I was going like... for this one, really, root notes work. I don't want to play anything more than that. But I'm just demoing that Mixolydian does work, and it's very much useful for all of the other things we've done, and anything where you see dominant seventh chords, perhaps not appropriate for this, but there you go. So like this. See, I can use all the notes within that pattern to get from the G7 to the C7. That might sound good. It's really important, by the way, I've only ever given you, usually, one octave going up. But learn the notes. C, B flat, A, G, F, E, D, C. So if you go this way, down, descending, it's going to be the same. It's actually the same pattern. You've got to recognize that with an open string. So you don't just want to only be playing a scale or a mode up and that's it. You've got to learn it everywhere. So that's what I did there. When it's a chromatic movement, we've seen that before. Why don't you do this? Look at the chord chart, learn the Mixolydian, both descending or ascending first and descending. We only have a G, F and E descending from here before we run out of bass. D7 now. Now the other thing comes to mind. All blues. If you want to get into your jazz, well, you can do that. You can match up this mode with the dominant chord. There are other options, but this is just one of the most common over that. So you could just look at the chord chart and just play the mode up and down. So G7 would be your G Mixolydian, C7 is C Mixolydian, D7 is D Mixolydian. And you will see, there's D Mixolydian here. You'll see within it the arpeggio. Take the first, third, fifth, seventh on any scale, you'll get a seventh chord. I'm using scale and mode interchangeably, okay? They're not technically the same things, but no one's perfect. So if you do that, you take the first, third, fifth and seventh, you'll get a seventh arpeggio. And that's why this works, because the seventh is that, the third is that, and they lock together, they match. That's why chord tones are so important in any style. So we have that, and then we have, I'll read this. This is a confusing looking super blues pattern with a lot of good stuff in it. So yeah, I'm going to show you how to use that now. Even me looking at this, I'm like, what have I done here? That looks horrendous. But let's break it down. So we've got the root note on G. Okay. Now, can you see the Mixolydian we just learned in there? If we ignore everything else, that's what we have. Then we have our flat third to major third. We learnt that very early on in the course. That sounds great. So it's down there, but also up here. So fifth fret of the D string is G, and I need to be able to play the first few notes also starting here. So that's where that comes in. You can also see within there your G7 arpeggio. So that isn't to say you must play all these notes in this order But you can, that did sound quite good. It's just to say that every single one of those notes on that diagram is an option for bass lines. We'll look at an example there. Don't forget your chromaticism, which I suppose that flat third does chromatically lead you from a second to a third, and that's a lovely sound. Anywhere where there's a gap between notes, that's an opportunity. So there I went from the E, the F, G, the major 6 to the flat 7, which did a chromatic movement. So I didn't put that in there. That truly would look crazy. But it's completely valid to do that. So here we've got this root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, major 3rd. That's the thing I just did. So So that's very much exploiting the fact that the G to the A to that chromatic thing just works. You'll hear it a lot. I can't tell you the first song or bass line I heard that in, but whenever I did, I borrowed it. And then the more you listen to different styles, or R&B, soul, Motown, blues, they're all very related. You hear James Jamerson, Donald Duck Dunn, all the greats, Tommy Shannon, they're all in the playlist. Maybe not James Jamerson, he's more Motown. But all of those players would use this. And then I just heard it in all the different things. It was like, all these bass lines using this. And that's where the light bulb moments happen as a bass player. And that's also where bass playing gets easier. The more you learn, the more you realize it's not 100 million different things. It's just like a handful of things that you need to learn. That's really the secret. It's a handful of things. One of which is this Mixolydian, where I guess it's not lesson 1 basics, but once you get it, you hear it everywhere. The major pentatonic shape can be used. That's, well, it's very similar to the Willie Dixon shape. That's another thing I mentioned. A lot of this stuff is the same. So let's just take that shape, and again, actually, that is also in the mega complicated shape. It's within there. So going to the chord symbols here, and I'm just using roots. So I'm now on C, so I'm using that movable pattern on C now. That didn't quite work there. Didn't like the sound of that going from the C to the G, so that's where you have to sort of use your ear a bit. Experience comes into it. When you go from one chord to another, there are a few moves that sort of always work. Approaching it from a fifth away tends to always work. I say always, like if you had your diminished or the other slightly weird things, it might not work, but often does. Let's go to D7 now. Because that's a D, and we're going to G, all of that would work. C7 now. My ear is crying out for me to play some of the Mixolydian notes there. I know I'm demoing major for here, but look, that's what my musicality wants me to do. It wants me to use more there. The more you practice this, the more you learn these shapes, the more your intuition takes over. That's why sometimes I have an intention to teach you one thing and my ears are like, no, play this other thing. It may be a bit confusing, sorry about that, but that's what I wanted to do there. Pentatonic. Pentatonic. I'm going to include this shape here. This is the major pentatonic, just up to here. Because we're in the key of G, that's the pentatonic for G major pentatonic. And any of those notes sound good as a fill in any point of this. Okay, so you can use those. This is the open version of it. And that's what I used actually when I was writing this. I was linking up different chords using some of the pentatonic notes just here. That's another thing that I learned somewhere along the way. I think it might even have been like a Bernard Edwards bass line, was doing some really simple movements between like a G and a C, but the other stuff sounded really amazing, and it was just that. And it's that thing, you study bass lines and you go, oh, that's a cool thing to do. Very simple roots, but pentatonic in the key that you're in, right? I'm just looking at the chord symbols here. That guides me here. I know what I can play over it. Okay, so that pentatonic, brilliant for fills, brilliant for linking the chords together. So just looking at that chord chart, we've got even eights. The style it is, it's quite fast. I probably would gravitate to just playing a really solid root note groove over this. And what I'm doing in this section of each of the songs is giving you the kitchen sink, you know, all those crazy patterns. But you don't have to use them everywhere, and you shouldn't use them everywhere. You should do the right thing, which is just locking in with your drummer, or the backing track in this case, and playing simply. But knowing that you can play whatever you want in any part to make it melodic is a great thing to have. And you may want to make something melodic. First lesson we were like root 5, flat 7 octave. Add some chromaticism in there. In this section of the course, for every song, I could have written out like 10 to 20 licks that I'm playing for you. But what I'm doing is just playing as I would in a session on, you know, a blues jam or something, and telling you what I'm doing in the moment. And it's far more useful, in my opinion, than giving you a bunch of things to read and just play the tab of it. It may take you longer. You may have to re-watch a lot of this, the whole course. You've got it for life, so you can do, and you may as well do. But I'm doing that thing of, you know, teaching a man to fish, that kind of idea of just you understanding what all of this stuff is. And there's that root 5 flat 7 octave. Hopefully you've learnt that pattern now. Some chromaticism ideas from before. There are 100 variations you can play on that one line. Rhythm, change the rhythm. And that's the thing. I want you to do what you feel like you want to do. So you need to, it's about making you more musical. So that's my long-winded way of explaining why I'm doing this, and well, I hope it helps. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said before, you have 4 little sections in each blues tune. You have the play along, you have me teaching you the exact written bass line, then I'll teach you the tempo, the key, and break down the song a bit. And by the way, each of the songs is based on a famous blues song. And then the 4th section is what you just saw, me teaching you how to improvise. So there's a blues rock, there's a 12/8, there's a 6/8, there's a major, there's a minor, there's, you know, like Blues Brothers type style, Chicago style blues. And that's what I wanted, just to get a little bit of variety in there. Anyway, look, thanks very much for watching. If you want any details of that course, I'll put a link down below.